We're now at this point where we can engineer our cells. We can do stem cell therapies. We can engineer the DNA in the cells to enhance them for some particular function and then put them back in.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Things are going great. How are things going with you, Iram?
Oh my gosh, Carl, you'll not believe this, but I went to Broadway last night, as one can do in New York City.
You notice the tone because Carl hardly ever goes to Broadway.
Shame on you, Carl. You call yourself a New Yorker?
I've been enough times, but it's not really high on my list. I think I'm way overdue for going to Broadway. But what did you see?
Yes. So I saw Death Becomes Her. And so there's been a lot of movies from the 80s and 90s that have been made into Broadway shows. Obviously, also television shows. I mentioned that I'd gone and seen Stranger Things on Broadway, but I went to go see Death Becomes Her. I went because I was recommended to go see it by Sarah Graham, who's a co-founder of Light One Bio, which makes biodyes, and we would love to talk to them and have them on the podcast soon. But anyway, I was like, really? There's a Broadway show about Death Becomes Her, which was a great movie made in 1992. Had Meryl Streep, Bruce Willis, amazing cast of characters, and what a wild storyline. And why I bring this up is because the storyline is all about longevity and living forever. It's so topical. I recommend you see the Broadway show if you can, if you come to New York. But of course, you can just see the movie. You can just watch it from streaming. And it's about these women who are very into their looks, one in particular, and she's, very visible. She's on Broadway or on herself, and she's getting older, aging, and she's done all of the nip and tucks, but needs to do a little bit more. And it comes across this woman who has this elixir. And the way that this woman describes it, she says that it defies the laws of nature. And I was like, wow. And the way that this woman's selling this potion, I'm like, does L'Oreal and Estee Lauder know about Death Becomes Her? Because they would get a lot of great quips. I could see like a whole like nostalgic commercial with Meryl Streep in it and like Bruce Willis coming together to redo it. Maybe the Super Bowl ad for next year could be that. Anyway, this is what we're doing. We're brainstorming, but you need to go to Broadway, Carl. You have to go. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. Okay. So it seems like it's one in a long line of Broadway revivals of shows. You mentioned Stranger Things. I know there's Harry Potter on Broadway. Back to the Future. Heathers was redone as a Broadway show. Mean Girls was a Broadway show. So I know the stories and the movies. I'm not sure I want to see them on stage. I'll go see something that's just a Broadway show at some point. But I'm glad you went.
Yeah. Well, and then I know, to give you credit, you don't go to the main stages, but you do see a lot of more off the beaten path type of things. And you introduced me to an event that we're going to go to next week.
So we're going to go see the Susumu Yokota World Listening Tour. If you don't know who Susumu Yokota is, he was a ambient musician. And so there's a place in Brooklyn called Head Hi-Fi, which is a bookstore coffee shop. And they're known for having this incredible speaker system. And I imagine they're going to be playing this album on vinyl. So it should be an experience. I'm not going to say it should be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but it's going to be for sure an experience to go in there and just be around a lot of other people who are listening to this album. And there is this trend of listening bars. I think it started in Japan, these bars where people just go to listen to full albums. And I've never gone to one, but I was excited to go to this event next week.
Thanks for introducing me to it, and I can't wait to go. But speaking of ambient and chillin', and we also were talking about longevity, you've seen some interesting news, or not even news, but a perspective in the New York Magazine about peptides.
Yeah, so peptides have been in the news. A couple of episodes ago, we mentioned that the New York Times had run a front page article about Chinese peptides. It had a picture of our friend Elliot Roth at his lab at the Frontier Tower in San Francisco. And New York Magazine did this whole long, very long article about peptides. And it starts out by saying life on peptides feels amazing. They talk about weight loss, they talk about injury recovery, and they talk a lot about people gaining energy back by taking these peptides, which weightlifters had been using for a long time. They became mainstream through the GLP-1s, which were originally for diabetes, but now people are using them for weight loss and a lot of other health effects. You might remember that a couple of years ago, Scott Galloway, the host of the Pivot podcast, said that GLP-1s were actually more important than GPT or ChatGPT. And from a health point of view, it's interesting to see how mainstream these peptides are becoming, because these peptides are not at all legal in the United States. Many of them are sold through gray market. They come from China. There's people who have testing labs that test their purity. And I think this is going to be a global phenomenon. We're seeing the beginning of something where people are taking these stacks of peptides. Personally, I can't wait. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, health is one thing, but then of course we're just talking about beauty and people will pay. I mean, we had Alessandro Zanari of OneSkin on the podcast talking about their products that have unique peptides to modulate cellular senescence to keep it at bay, which is this process of aging, that one of the biomarkers, and they identified it and created peptides to be able to regulate it. So peptides can do an amazing job of communicating with their cells and make it do different things or not make it do different things. You know, it can control a bit more of your cellular production. So there's going to be a lot of peptides, but then it's like, what are the ones that work correctly? Because there could be ones that have some consequences. We don't know. I mean, just making sure that with any type of new technology or new innovation, we need to make sure that they work, that they're regulated, and that they're safe. So interesting. I'm excited that it's becoming more of a mainstream conversation.
Yeah.
And
sure.
of course, we'll have more people on this podcast to talk about peptides that enable us to grow everything and live healthier, longer, and hopefully more beautiful lives.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about a little bit more of a somber topic. As we record this, the Trump administration just revoked a foundational scientific ruling that greenhouse gases are a threat to public health. This is one of the legal underpinnings of the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to act on climate change under the Clean Air Act. And people have been trying to undermine or eliminate this legislation for more than 16 years. I've been following the coverage in the New York Times and the BBC. We'll put a link to the BBC story in here. But basically what this means is that the government doesn't need to follow the Clean Air Act. People are saying, oh, this is going to give polluters the right to pollute again. I think that maybe we've moved on beyond that, but I think that there will be people who take advantage of this. Really what it does is it makes our environment much less healthy. And I'm not sure that this is something that everybody wants. I think it's probably just a few billionaires who are happy that now they can go back to polluting. What do you think, Iram?
Oh my gosh. I hope that is not the case. There's one thing to be contrarian and just say, oh, well, we didn't create this Clean Air Act and it's causing more regulation than necessary. And so we need to alleviate some of that regulation in order to create more innovation or enable new things to come onto the market that might not have pollution as a outcome. But I don't know all the nitty gritty of what the Clean Air Act entails. But if you're saying that this is a signal for people at big companies to pollute, that's just wrong, right? And how does this affect what we talk about here on the Grow Everything podcast when it comes to biomanufacturing? Is it doesn't. And here's why. We talk about biomanufacturing because when we talk about biology, we say that the Venn diagram between biology and climate is a circle. It's the same thing. And that came from our friend Kristen Ellis, who was at Lower Carbon Capital and now at Convergent Research. We say that sustainability and climate is table stakes when it comes to biomanufacturing. And that what biology and biomanufacturing enable are products to be made that are either drop-in or novel, that are low cost or not, but just new types of molecules to be made in a safer, easier, low-cost way. Because when we think about chemistry, we think about a lot of energy being used when biology operates on ambient temperatures. And anyway, long story short, we look at biomanufacturing as an economic developer. Yes, it also helps the planet. I just hope that this isn't a signal for people that are building valuable companies that are, we can say they're climate forward, that they are not harming the environment. So hopefully business as usual for our industry, but let the market forces enable biomanufactured products to be more used than petrochemical products. But who knows, that's what we hope for. Any other thoughts, Carl? I mean, this was something that was a bit of a shock to a lot of people, and shock and awe is what this administration has been doing a lot of. Talk to me about it.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is it's another step in relinquishing clean energy to China and Chinese innovation, because what this says is our old technologies are fine. There's no reason for us to change technology. We can continue to keep burning fossil fuels and pollution doesn't matter. Whereas, like, the tack that the Chinese are taking seems to be really that focus on solar, wind, and cleaning up their own environment, which in turn allows them to sell those products externally. And, we don't get Chinese EVs, which is unfortunate because it means that we don't have competition. And we know that competition is a good thing when it comes to corporate interests or corporate innovation. So I see this as tragic. I'd like to understand what the economic impacts of it are going to be. But I think what I said earlier was it is going to make the US less healthy overall. And it's too bad because people have dedicated entire lifetimes and entire careers to environmental causes that have made the United States a lot cleaner than it was 30, 40, 50 years ago.
One of the things about the Clean Air Act and just having these regulations to say what's the life cycle of the products and ingredients and fuel and everything we're putting out there, like what happens at the end of life. And I think that it's a forcing function for innovation when you're saying, like, okay, let me think about how what I'm producing affects the environment and the health of people. And if it has negative effects, people aren't going to want to use it. And one of the things I mentioned in previous episodes is the idea of food dye, is that a lot of food dye now, they're made from petrochemistry and it's in our food. And parents, us being parents, we don't want our kids, and humans too, or all humans don't want to be eating food that has negative consequences. So we need to stop. But then it's like, what's the solution? What's the alternative? And if that alternative is not only not as toxic, but healthier for you, and of course, at the same cost or less, there's no question to use that option. But if there's no other option out in the market, what else do we have, right? So it's very interesting. I hope that all the innovators and people working at these large companies, or even obviously the petrochemical industry, even the people in those industries, to look at cleaner alternatives as a forcing function for innovation. Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
But speaking of energy and clean tech and technology in general, did you see the conversation between Larry Fink of BlackRock and Elon Musk during the World Economic Forum talking about AI in space?
No, I didn't see that at all. I kind of paid a little bit of attention to this idea of data centers in space and Elon's pivot to putting a colony on the moon so he could launch satellites from there. That's been the extent of it. What was the conversation about?
It was interesting because it was like Elon before he got involved in politics, Elon. So he was really talking about his whole mission and drive to create civilizations across the solar system and interstellar space and how to get there. And that's what's driving him, because Larry, I think, was asking him questions about it. And I thought it was really interesting because the topic of AI, of course, came up, and energy usage and how much energy is needed to power AI to create robots. And one of the things that Elon was saying is that he sees a future where there'll be more robots than humans, and which I thought was okay. That's
interesting. Yeah.
That's one future. That's one future. But then obviously they all need to be powered. And so where does energy going to come from? And one of the things he was talking about, I don't know if he said this exactly, but this is where my mind went. He was talking about solar, and solar being the most abundant energy that we have. And then how can we harness it? And it has to be harnessed through space, because on Earth we have, first of all, the day-night cycle. So at night, you don't have access to the solar. And then you obviously have a lot of weather. So weather conditions, cloudy. If you have them in the desert, you have, sand blowing all over the place. It gets dirty and rain. And so to be able to create energy plants in space, like in space satellites, I don't know if you talked about that or I'm just dreaming this up, but to be able to then harness that energy from outside of Earth, outside of Earth, and to be able to somehow get it back down to Earth. And then that's just abundant energy for everyone, where then petrochemistry or oil doesn't have a role to play when it comes to energy dependency, right? And I thought that was really interesting to see, like, first of all, is anyone working on that? Listeners, if you know if anyone's working on creating solar energy in space to bring down to Earth, that is really interesting because that then is pure abundance right there.
Yeah, I don't see that as being a new idea. So I think that if Elon is talking about it, I feel like I've heard this a lot in the past.
Have you heard it in reality or in sci-fi?
Good question. I don't remember. I don't think I've read it in sci-fi. I think I've read it more in scientific press. I know that data centers has become controversial. They're building these things all over the country. They're driving up energy costs. Public opinion has been turning against data centers. They create a bunch of jobs when they're being built, but then it just takes a handful of people to run them. And Elon's talking about data centers in space. I can get behind the solar energy part of it. That makes sense, but it's still expensive to send things into space. So is it really cost effective to be talking about moving data centers into space now? Maybe in a few years, as things get cheaper, it's going to make a lot more sense than right now.
Yeah. I mean, we'd send, obviously, satellites in space.
Yeah.
So is it like a modular thing where those satellites then become solar energy vessels? But anyway, I'm dreaming, and that's what we do here often. And hopefully that gives people some fodder for their imaginations. But yeah, of course, we love dreaming. And someone who we love to dream with is John Cumbers, who we are interviewing today. Or I don't want to say we're interviewing him because this is his 4th time on our podcast. And he's definitely a friend. You've known him longer. And we wanted to have him back on. Tell us a little bit more about John.
Okay, so John, for those of you who don't know him, is the founder of SynbioBeta, which is an organization and an event, and it's the hub for really emerging engineering biology or synthetic biology. John and I wrote a book together, which we published in 2017, which is Biostrategy. And John is the first guest we've ever had who's been on 4 times. So I'm really excited to catch up with John and hear what's going on.
And we have a little surprise for our listeners towards the end of the episode to attend SynbioBeta, so stay tuned for that. But let's let our conversation with John take it away.
All right, Dr. John Cumbers, friend of the Grow Everything pod. We are so excited to have you on. It's the 4th time you've been on our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Aram, Carl. So good to see you both.
Great to see you too. Let's kick it off by talking about this year's SynbioBeta. One of the things that strikes me about this upcoming event is that you're going to moderate a session with a guy who's been bitten by snakes more than 200 times. And this guy wants to create a universal anti-venom. Why are you into this story, and what does it tell us about the kind of science that people can expect at this year's SynbioBeta?
So this is an amazing story that captured the imagination. It was on CNN. It was in the New York Times when it came out last year. And this guy is an amazing individual. His name is Tim Friede. And he just is a snake geek, specifically a snake bite geek. And I don't know why he got into it, but many years ago, he just started getting bitten by snakes on purpose and demonstrating that he could build up immunity to snake venom. So he's been bitten by a ton of different kinds of snakes, like black mambas, a bunch of different biting snakes. And he stopped doing it, but he now is this walking hybridoma of antibodies against snakes and against snake venom. And this is actually a really big problem. Like, snakes kill many, many thousands of people every year in countries like India and Australia, and they don't have a good source of antivenom. And so Jake Glanville, who you both know has been at SynbioBeta for many years, Jake is the founder of a company called Centivax. And Jake was at Stanford. He did his PhD there. He was one of the founders of the field of immunorepertoire sequencing. And immunorepertoire sequencing is sequencing your antibodies. So he's an expert on immunology, and Centivax is his vaccine company. And he's making a universal flu vaccine, which very interestingly just went into clinical trials in Australia last week and is looking really good. I'm actually an advisor to Centivax, so I know the company very well. But Jake is always looking at new projects and new things. And so Jake has been looking at this snake antivenom problem for a while now. And he heard about Tim Freedy, and he said, I want to sequence this guy. I want to sequence the immunorepertoire of this guy, because inside of that guy's blood are going to be all of these amazing antivenom antibodies that could be then used and produced recombinantly and be able to produce then tons of this snake antivenom for all the people who get bitten around the world. So he reached out. They started a collaboration. They sequenced him. They did find these really potent antivenom antibodies. And they're going on to the next steps in terms of looking to commercialize these. So we thought, let's bring him to the SynbioBeta. Let's put it on the stage and let's have the people talk and listen about this really interesting individual, but this really amazing project.
You know what it reminds me of is, do you know this book called The Sting of the Wild?
No, I don't.
This guy, Justin Schmidt, I had to look it up, but I do have the book and I've read it. He ended up creating the Schmidt Sting Pain Index. And in the book, it actually has a description of the pain that you feel when you're bitten by different insects. And like his descriptions are so incredible. And I think it's like a scale from 0 to 100, where like 100 is the absolute worst, most lingering pain that you get from, I think, these California desert wasps. Apparently, it feels like you've got ants crawling inside of you after you've been stung, and the feeling lingers for days. So this guy getting bit by the snakes reminded me of the Schmidt Pain Index.
Well, I will bring it up. I'll ask him rank the snakes you've been bitten by in order of pain you felt.
Yeah, I think that's me so fascinating to hear what he has to say about like how he even started this, and yes, the scale of pain. What a fascinating topic to have at SynbioBeta. And SynbioBeta has come a very long way, and I wanted our listeners to hear a little bit about the history of SynbioBeta. It's been over 10 years going, and we wanted to know, like, why did you come up with this, and how has it evolved over the years?
It's now 14 years, and I started it because I've always been passionate about events and passionate about synthetic biology and biotechnology. And also, I have dyslexia. And so I learn from meeting really interesting people. So people have described SynbioBeta like John and friends coming together, because literally everybody that you meet at SynbioBeta has got some interesting story or some interesting reason that they're there, or some interesting venture fund or startup company or technology that they're looking to find a co-founder. So I started it because I'm just so passionate about bringing interesting people together. And ultimately, I've got big dreams of things that I hope biotechnology is going to be able to achieve in the next few years. One of them is human longevity. So that's a big theme of the event, human health and human longevity. The other one is space in terms of biomanufacturing, being able to produce food and biomaterials and anything that you might need for future human settlement. But then all of these things are very applicable to the big problems that we see and that we're having on Earth, like climate change, like aging populations, like food scarcity. So it's really just a collection of really interesting people, interesting companies, entrepreneurs and investors who come together each year. And now we just do focus on this one big event a year. In 2016, we did events in Singapore and San Francisco and London. And those are fun, but we find we're bringing more value to the community by creating this network of people who come together in one place every year and listen to the biggest advances, learn about the new technologies, meet the people who are announcing new products or new investment rounds, and seeing for themselves in the expo all the products of the bioeconomy that people are making as well.
Yeah, it's definitely our highlight of the year for me, for us. And I've also been going almost from the beginning. It's always a treat to be around a lot of people that I only see once a year. One thing that you've got going on this year is a session called Bio 500. And it's about the world's biggest companies transforming their value chains with biotech. Is the bioeconomy finally being driven by demand, or is it still a supply push from startups hoping that someone's going to buy from them?
I think that there is a lot of demand coming from the marketplace. In that session in particular, we have the head of biotechnology from Unilever who's coming to the conference. And he's been at this for more than 20 years, trying to push a boulder up a hill to try to get a big organization like Unilever to turn and look at moving away from petrochemicals, moving towards biochemicals. He's done some really interesting work in polymers and materials, and also in palm oil replacements. So I think that's a really, really big deal. And that fireside chat is going to be with Alex Sangolini, who's the founder of Zeta, spun out of David Baker's lab. So it's all about AI and how we're applying AI to building new and different kinds of enzymes that are having a big impact on planetary health and sustainability. I think that's a big market signal that we have the head of biotechnology from Unilever who's going to be coming to the show. And I think it's also important that they're partnering with the innovation ecosystem, that they're choosing to partner with Zeta to make these new kinds of enzymes using AI.
Yeah, I mean, that is super exciting. We know that P&G has been a big supporter and a big part of SynbioBeta. We just had them on the pod a couple of weeks ago. And yet we also know that there's been a lot of challenges when it comes to the biotech industry. One session that I also noticed is you're going to be talking about plant-based sales and how they've been slowing down. Our thesis here at Messaging Lab has been that consumer bio is going to leapfrog industrial biotech. Do you think that this slowdown when it comes to plant-based sales shows the opposite?
First of all, how did I forget about Procter & Gamble as well? So we have not just Unilever, but Procter & Gamble, who are a big sponsor of the event. And Amy Trejo is going to be there, and Jose Carlos Garcia is going to be there as well. So I think that is really important. Going back to plant-based sales, there's been a chilling across the whole industry for the last year because of the Trump administration coming in and just tearing up all of the climate policy from the previous administration. So, yeah, it's difficult for that industry, which was very nascent and very fragile, to grow before it was really getting good signal from the government, like this is important, biomanufacturing is important, climate change is important, renewable products are important, the circular bioeconomy is important. And then when that disappears overnight, it just creates a chilling effect across the industry. So it wasn't just plant-based foods, but yeah, all bio-based chemicals and materials were hit by that. Now, it is interesting that you mentioned plant sales, because I thought there's one really interesting plant sale, which I think are going to be coming back to the conference to give us an update, which is Light Bio, the bioluminescent petunia. You've probably had Keith on your show to talk about what they're doing.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, we will.
Well, you should do.
Yes.
If you need an intro, I'd be happy to connect you. So that is going gangbusters. That's going really well. And they are going to have a big announcement about a big public company that's going to start selling their petunias to consumers. But they're already doing very, very good. They're already doing great sales. So I switched topics on you to another more interesting plant-based sale than plant-based meat. But also going back to plant-based meat, we have Bruce Friedlich from the Good Food Institute, who's going to be speaking at the conference. So he's got a new book out called Meat. He's a big advocate for cellular agriculture. And so I think he's going to give a big update from the stage about what's going on in that field.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting to hear, because I think there's been a lot of downturn in that space when it comes to cellular ag. We've had some big companies out there. Ginkgo had their company, remind me of their name.
Motif,
yeah. But people are still fans of it. We recently had a gentleman by the name of Daniel Schraff of Startup CPG on our podcast. And he admits he's not a bio person, but he did work at Just Egg. And so he did know a lot about, cellular ag, and hopes that that will be more prevalent and we get the economics right so that more people can enjoy cellular agriculture. So I love that. I can't wait to hear that session at SynbioBeta. And so to go on this topic of companies that have big aspirations, raise large amounts of funding, yet unfortunately they aren't succeeding or they have failed. And we have looked at a lot of stories of companies that have failed. We had Veronica Breckenridge of First Bite Ventures on. They wrote a report called the Graveyard Report. I don't know if you've seen this, John.
I did, yeah, I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And one of the big takeaways was that 80% of those companies failed on execution, not science. The science was right. Are we still over-investing in discovery and under-investing in commercialization, like go-to-market strategies?
It's interesting. I feel like the majority of synthetic biology founders have become enamored with the tool, the technology that they developed. And then they went out there with that hammer looking for a nail. And I think the next generation of synthetic biology founders are going to be looking at the market first and then going out and saying what tool or technology is out there. I mean, this is the trouble. We're all bio geeks, so we want to use biology as the main tool, as the main hammer. We don't want to be in non-bio solutions. But interestingly, when you bring in seasoned business executives like Nicole from Alonia, the spin out from Ginkgo, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think their main technology now for removing PFAS and other things from water is a bio-based solution. You can start with the problem or you can start with the tool or technology. And I think when money becomes tight, people need to switch and really focus in on what is the problem that people in the marketplace are going to pay for. That's, I think, where you're already seeing a lot of value being created with companies like Novo Nordisk producing the GLP-1s or Lilly producing the GLP-1s, or Azeda that I mentioned before that's producing enzymes for converting stevia to make artificial sweeteners. So I think there's a lot of potential for the next generation of bio founders to start with the problem and to grow companies from the bottom up, even bootstrapping companies. I met a really interesting founder from a company called Anomaly Bio, and they're going to have a breakout session at the conference this year on default alive companies. The founder told me it's from an essay by Paul Graham, founder of Y Combinator. And the default alive company is where you don't go into the business needing to raise money from VCs. It's similar to a bootstrapped company, but it's a little different that you find the problem, you get contracts with the people that you're going to solve the problem for. And this company, Anomaly Bio, is doing scale up and biomanufacturing, but they're getting the contracts ahead of time and they're going out and they probably don't need to raise VC money. They can probably raise traditional debt financing from banks in order to do that. So a default alive company, I think we're going to see a lot more of those because the interest rates are still high. Venture capital is going to take a long time, I think, to come back to what it was before. And it may never come back to what it was before in 0% interest times.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. I would say a couple of things. One is, first of all, I love that you have this running Rolodex of companies and what they're doing in your head to draw from. I mean, if this is what you do, it's so fascinating and helpful because you're grounding a lot of these concepts and actual companies and people that are doing things, and so helpful to understand. So thank you for that.
It's difficult to keep up, particularly in an exponentially growing technology field. It's not that pleasant to have to keep up with everything.
Yeah, but it keeps it sharp. You have to. You have
Exactly.
You're on stage. You're at the hub, the center of this ecosystem. But good job. Keep it up. Keep it up. Every morning, I can just imagine you just looking through cards or Zeta.
I don't memorize them, but I do just introduce people prolifically. Whenever I meet somebody, I can't help but say, "Oh, have you met this person? Have you met that person?" There's like 3, 4, or 5 people that come out of every call that I have that I then got a very nice system for introducing people. But
Yes, yes. And we've been on the receiving end of those introductions. So thank you so
That's
much.
right.
Thank you so
That's right.
much.
Yeah.
Um,
Welcome.
yes. And then I want to go back to this idea that you mentioned about biotech solutions, the hammer that's looking for a nail. And there seems to be a lot of similarity in the world of AI, where there are all these AI developers or programmers that have created some novel ways of processing data or pattern recognition, and they're looking for applications. And I always mention a quick story is that I had gone to this AI summit, and everyone there were programmers, and they're talking about all sorts of things like transformers and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And then I introduced myself to some people. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in the world of biotech. And as I was talking to people, like I suddenly became like the cool kid in the room. Everyone's like, oh, an application, an application. And everyone's like, well, tell me more about biology. Like, what's going on there? I'm like, well, there's so much information. There's so much we can do. You can grow everything. Subscribe and listen to the podcast. Like, and they were like, wow. And so like AI has been doing this for quite some time, but then all of a sudden we had this ChatGPT moment, right? Everyone's on it. All of a sudden there's this huge use case with these LLMs, people searching and talking and befriending AI. But so I wanted to ask this question and frame it this way, because at SynbioBeta, you had this session called the data reality check. And that basically admits that most AI models fail when they hit the wet lab. Is that moment further away than we thought, that biotech ChatGPT moment, or is it close?
Yeah, I've been meeting with a number of companies that are developing these multimodal models. So for the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of LLMs that have taken the DNA sequences and produced LLMs for you to then produce new DNA sequences. And then viral genomes, we had Evo2 was talked about on the stage by Patrick Hsu from the Arc Institute, and then last year from his colleague, Brian He at Stanford. And then we have other companies like Syntensa, who are using whole human genomes for feeding into large language models, and companies like Atomic AI. Raphael Townsend spoke last year on RNA world and producing LLMs from RNA. So I think where people are most excited are these multimodal models, where you're not just taking RNA data or DNA data or protein data, but one of the companies that's going to be speaking this year is Noetic, and they just announced a $50 million deal with GSK, upfront payment, to license their model. And this was the first, maybe the second example of a new business model for these AI model companies, which is a pharma company is actually coming in and licensing the model. And so I think that's a big deal. And so I don't think the ChatGPT moment is going to come until we have closed the loop on organism design, going through the design, build, test, learn cycle really quickly, so that you can vibe code a genome, vibe code a bacterium, and have it booted up and put it in a tank, a stir flask, and see the fruits of your labor. I think that's the Chat GPT moment. Or maybe it will come later when it's the design of a plant and something that you can actually see, or design of a mushroom, and you've got your engineered spores that you've just created in your synthesizer, and then you plant them, and then overnight you see the next morning, boom, popping up out of the soil, your beautiful mushrooms. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah, that'd be really amazing. I will say really quick, now we did this predictions episode for this year, and one of the things that we predicted was that we could write and boot up a genome this year because we saw the rate at which everything was happening. Do you think that'll happen this year? I mean, is it the discovery and the DBTL, the design, build, test, learn, happening at a faster rate, that we could see that happen this year, or is that just too ambitious?
Did you see the Sidewinder paper that came out in Nature Biotechnology a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, can you brief us on that really?
Yeah, tell us about it.
So this is a scientist at Caltech called Kai-Hang Wang. And he was at Jason Chin's lab at the Medical Research Lab in Cambridge. Then he went on to become a professor at Caltech. Him and colleagues have invented a technology called Sidewinder, which allows you to put into DNA assembly page numbers. So you can have a multiplex reaction of oligos in a pot. You can create then genes and genomes from that based on these clever ways to assemble the oligos together with these page numbers. So it says, okay, this bit goes number 1, this bit goes number 2, this bit goes number 3. And then when it's all assembled, you can take out the joins, so you don't see the joins in it. So this is pretty revolutionary. It could drop the cost of synthesis and assembly by 2 to 3 orders of magnitude, which is the kind of step change that we've been looking for to make biology truly programmable. And they've spun it out into a company. The CEO and the founder of the company is called Adrian Wolfson. And he just had a book launch in London just this week. So they've started this company. It's called Genero, Genyro. And that is going to solve a big bottleneck in the build. And so my prediction is that we had a bottleneck in design. AI fixed that. We had a bottleneck in build. Genero and other assembly technologies and synthesis companies are fixing that. So I think the next one is going to be in test. And automation, self-driving labs are about to solve that piece. So the design, build, test, learn cycle kind of has square wheels, and we can get stuck on one piece for a few years or even a decade. Twist moved the wheel forward on build significantly 10 years ago when they announced their first product at SynbioBeta. Then we were stuck on design for many years until AI came along and said, oh, now you can design genomes with AI, with Evo 2. So yeah, I think the next big and exciting area is going to be self-driving labs. And we have Trilo Bio is doing a breakout session on self-driving labs. We're looking to do another session with some of the big AI companies who are excited about self-driving labs. Ginkgo just had a big announcement with OpenAI on this topic as well. I think the step changes are coming. And will we boot up we've already kind of booted up a synthetic genome with Craig Venter's work on mycoplasma. So I think it's not about, will it be this year? I think it's more about, will we get to a point where the genome designers can rapidly iterate and see the products of their labor?
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. One of the things that our listeners might not know is that you are a huge traveler. You travel all over the world, you visit labs, you visit different people, and you also travel for fun with your family. You've gone to China a bunch, and you just published a piece talking about the profitability of Chinese biomanufacturing firms. Well, we've had some challenges here in the West. We've seen a lot of failed scale-ups. What do you think industrial biotech can learn from what you've seen in China?
Yeah, I've been to China over 10 times over the last 25 years. And I'm taking a group of 30 CEOs and founders to Shanghai, Suzhou, Hangzhou, Beijing in July of this year. And maybe that's something you guys are interested in joining us as well.
Ooh, yeah.
And
cool.
we're going to be visiting some of these scale-up facilities. We're going to be visiting some of the investors. We're going to be visiting some of the giant biotech parks like the Suzhou Industrial Park, which I've been to twice before, and showing people with their own eyes what is happening in China. And my God, China is just going gangbusters, not just in the bioeconomy and synthetic biology and biomanufacturing, but just it's like a future high-tech country. It's leaving the rest of the world in the dust. I was in Tokyo last year twice, and then in Shanghai twice as well. And China's just got nothing on Japan now. Japan used to be this amazing futuristic place, right? And you go to Japan and it just feels like a backwater. So does Singapore compared to what's going on in China. From a biomanufacturing point of view, Chinese have been doing fermentation for thousands of years with soy and tofu and many of these fermented products that you can get. So they understand the power of fermentation. They understand the power of scale up. And for the last 30 years, maybe more, they have dominated the amino acid market. And this is a big product of fermentation. They used to have a lot of plants in the US. It all got outsourced to China. I don't think we make any amino acids right now. So they've done a lot of you could say, predatory business practices to grow particular industries and dominate particular markets and wipe out competition. And then once you've got the monopoly, you can raise the prices because you're the only amino acid supplier in town, for example. And they've done that in many industries. I'm not saying it's good. I actually prefer competition, love capitalism and the ability to compete. They compete very much internally in China to find the winners of the companies. So they have incredibly competitive economy internally, and then they export that to the rest of the world. From a biomanufacturing point of view, they care about it because China is run by technocrats. They understand climate change. They understand circular economies. They understand sustainability. And they understand that, hey, if we can get these systems that are circular and renewable, in the long term, if we develop that technology internally, they will be sustainable and they will be more profitable. So the US was doing that under Biden, under various administrations in terms of the Biomanufacturing Act. And now it's just been, as I said before, the chilling effect across the whole ecosystem. Well, China hasn't had that chilling effect. And what's more, when I go visit some of the companies in China and see these facilities, they're right next to the manufacturing plants that are going to be making furniture or curtain linings or cases for iPhones. And so that technology that comes directly out of the scale-up facility is going directly into a market and into a product and then shipped around the world. So they've not just got the foresight to invest in the infrastructure and the scale-up, but they've also connecting it directly to the manufacturing and going straight into products, which are going out the door.
I just read Breakneck, and I think you and I talked about it a little bit.
That's Dan Wang, right?
Yeah, Dan Wang's book.
And I'm actually going to see him at Stanford next week. I'm speaking at an event. He's going to be speaking at it.
The thesis is China's run by engineers, you said technocrats, and the US is run by lawyers. So lawyers put up a lot of shade and prevent things from happening very quickly.
With the Epstein class.
Yeah. And then, and China with its engineers is very successful at building, but sometimes not so successful when it comes to social engineering. It's a very interesting contrast. And you can tell, Dan, that the part I loved about the book the most, I mean, the whole book was great, but I loved at the end where he's talking about, he wishes his parents would move to Sunset Park, which is a couple neighborhoods away from us. It's a very vibrant Chinese and Mexican neighborhood, but he wishes his parents would move there because it reminds him the closest to what like a Chinese neighborhood would be like in China. But I continue to be impressed by what we see coming out of China. We've been very lucky to work with a number of Chinese firms over the year. And so the whole thing from the current administration, anti-environment, has turned biotech into a defense industry is very interesting and unfortunately a bit short-sighted.
Agreed.
Yeah, and a lot of manufacturing writ large happens in China. And when we talk to people that are not in our industry of industrial biotech or biotech, and we talk about it affecting all industries, they think of pharma first. And pharma has really been working with China when it comes to producing pharmaceutical grade products, which of course has a different type of manufacturing than what we talk about here when it comes to industrial biotech, which is all the chemicals and other types of materials that are being made through biotech. And I'm curious, I mean, you touched on this too, you talked about the technocrats running things in China, this idea of the centralized planning. And that's core to how China has been developing their 5-year plan and how they offer resources to the population in order to have this industry grow. Thinking of that and perhaps other insights, what do you think we could do here in the US to speed up our game a bit?
It's a good question. I think one thing we could do is make our economy more competitive. And we are surrounded by corporate monopolies and oligopolies, whether it's your cell phone service or your supermarket or the fertilizer that you put on your crops or the tractors that you drive in the fields or the computers that you buy or the cell phones that you purchase. And part of the reason that we have these corporate monopolies is because of the regulatory capture that goes on in Washington, D.C. And part of the regulatory capture in Washington, D.C. is because of Citizens United and the impact of money in politics. You can see that exactly in the Epstein files and the cover-up that's happening there. it's just a disaster how corporatized our media is and our politics is. And it creates an economy that doesn't work for everybody. So I would love to see a more fair marketplace of businesses, of ideas. And I think the more competitive we can make the US economy by breaking up the monopolies and the oligopolies, will share the wealth and create more economic value. And if we continue to shield the American economy, particularly from Chinese innovation, by saying China's producing better electric cars than us, so what do? Well, we ban them from importing electric cars. And we say, well, China is producing better drugs than us. Well, what do? Well, we ban our companies from doing business with Chinese companies. Same with the chips. That is so short-sighted because Japan tried this in the 1980s. And I was watching an opinion piece from Fareed Zakaria at CNN who talked about this. And he said, Japan did this. It centralized its economy. It picked winners and losers. And it invested heavily in electronics in the 1980s. And what did we get? We got the Walkman and we got these flat screen TVs and we got all this innovation coming out of Japan, which was amazing. And Japan looked like it was unstoppable. And then what happened? Well, then these big, giant corporate, centralized planned electronics companies run out of steam because they're not these organic, innovative organizations. They're these brittle structures that can't bend and flex and adapt to technology and adapt to the economy. And so they all fell over. And so there's very little left of the Japanese. We don't buy hardly any Japanese electronics anymore. So to compete with China, we don't want to copy what China's doing in terms of centrally planned innovation or centrally planned economy. We want to do what America is great at, which is free market capitalism. But as I said before, I don't think we live in a free market. I think we live in a very corrupt market, and we need to, at its core, try to do things to make the US economy more competitive.
Well said. You're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about what's going on in the US economy and politics. And one of the things that we heard from other attendees of SynbioBeta last year, we were there, we loved it. It was great, of course, because you're always meeting people and you're always introducing us to people, and we love that. But some attendees felt that SynbioBeta was too quiet on political threats to science funding. Does the biggest Symbio conference on the planet have a responsibility to say something from the main stage about that?
I think that it's an open platform and people apply to speak, and I welcome all voices. I found it interesting because people didn't say this at the event or in the lead up to the event. I only heard about it after the event. Publicly, I'm pretty apolitical, but I'm actually very passionate about politics. But I feel like there's a time and a place for it. And we want to welcome everybody to SynbioBeta. We don't want it to be a partisan thing. I mean, we are right in the middle of California, so it's the demographics say who's going to be coming to it.
We have people from all over the world that come, actually. It's really interesting to see the delegations from Australia, Japan, everyone there for the spirit of the innovation that's happening in biology and biotech. I think really here the thing was, for a lot of the innovators who are in the US and rely on some government funding, when all of that funding was pretty much eliminated, they felt that it was taken away from them and they weren't able to innovate as much. And maybe not taking a stance, but having that discussion maybe would be more cathartic for the people that felt that they didn't have the resources, that they were ignored by the government, and especially because there were people from the government that were attending. But I just more thinking of where do we have this type of discussion so that the innovators can ask for that type of help from their government?
Yeah, I mean, we had the heads of ARPA-H, we had the head of DARPA BTO, we had somebody from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and they were all there, receptive, listening. So even though we didn't shout about it from the main stage, clearly disaster for science, and a lot of our strategy is misguided. Yeah, if I thought it would help, I'd be glad to do it, but I'm preaching to the choir. But I'll put my political chips into the fight when they need to be. But other than that, I'm not sure that my talking about it is going to be quite as helpful as people may think.
All right, let's switch gears a little bit. You touched on this a little bit at the beginning, and one of the areas that we've been tracking and we're seeing a lot of activity in is longevity. And last year you had a session with Jason Kelly of Ginkgo Bioworks and Brian Johnson, founder of the Don't Die movement. What exciting developments have you seen in longevity over the past year?
Yeah, there's two areas that I think are very, very exciting. One is cellular reprogramming. So using these Yamanaka factors, these transcription factors that turn on and off cellular differentiation, and then being able to use these for programming iPSCs, stem cells that can turn into any other cell. We have Jean Loring, who's coming back from one of the founders of Aspen Neuroscience, that's got a Parkinson's treatment for putting stem cells back into the brain and rejuvenating the brain. We have John Hebert, who's coming. He's got a new program at ARPA-H on brain rejuvenation. And we have David Sinclair coming.
Nice.
He's going to be doing a VIP dinner with us on the Wednesday night for the biopharma industry. And he's also done some recent work on reprogramming and curing blindness in mice and macular degeneration. So there's a lot of human health and longevity that's coming. Oh, and a new company called Polyphron, which I'm particularly enamored with. And Matt Osborne is the founder of Polyphron with his co-founder Fabio. And they're both going to be coming, and they're going to be talking about their company, which is a company that can take your own cells and stem cells and make banks of frozen stem cells of different kinds of tissue. So take your skin cells, convert them into iPSCs, differentiate those iPSCs into different kinds of tissues, and then be able to freeze those tissues so that you've got then a ready supply of any kind of stem cell in your body. So if anything breaks or you need to be replaced, you've got this tissue bank lined up to be able to
I love that.
do that. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And it's so much less scary than the idea of clones or body parts. It's just tissue banks of cells. It's, yeah.
I wonder how much that'll cost. We get the SynbioBeta discount.
Yeah.
What's the promo code?
I love it.
Yeah.
I'll take two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. Yeah.
Of course, like longevity is so hot. Everybody wants to live longer. There's always the conversation of, do you want to live forever? You want more life to your years, not more years to your life, type of situation. Right. And it's interesting to see what products are coming out there too. So it'd be great to, because a lot of people, a lot of the entrepreneurs I come to SynbioBeta, they're making very fundamental technologies that can then be incorporated into products, whether they're skincare or nutraceuticals or injectables. And you start seeing a lot coming out from these big CPG companies or these beauty companies like L'Oreal has their Longevity Institute. And so it's going to be really interesting to see. A little funny side stories. Last night, I went to go to see a show on Broadway. It was Death Becomes Her. I don't know if you've seen that movie. It came out in the early 1990s.
But I think I remember it. Is it Angela Lansbury? Is she in it?
No. It's,
I think it was Mel Streep.
Yeah, Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep's in it. Bruce Willis is in it too. And it's about, they live forever, but it's like this potion. And this potion, the woman that has found this potion, they say it defies the laws of nature. And I was like, wow. I was like, that's a cool tagline for a product, because everyone's like, natural, natural. It's like, well, natural, we're here. We're just here stagnant at natural. We want to defy the laws of natural and nature and go beyond. And what does that look like? So anyway, a little aside, I think there's so much value to be had when it comes to longevity, because people will pay. People will pay for those products. And in the movie Death Becomes Her, they pay a very pretty price for that. Besides money, it's their, life. But anyway, yeah.
I heard Omri Drury, who's at NFX Capital. You guys know Omri, and he's going to be speaking at the conference. And he gave an example. He said, I might screw this example up, but he said, if you gave somebody the choice of having another healthy 10 years now or $1 billion when you are 80 years old? Which of those would you choose? And he said it's pretty obvious which of those you would choose. What use is $1 billion when you're 80? And of course, what use is 10 years of healthy life right now? And so he said, well, that gives a market price for longevity, which is that practically people will pay anything to stay younger. So I think it's an interesting way to look at it. That, yeah, I think there is a huge market out there for this. But I want to see radical things. I don't want to see like single enzyme protein therapeutics or concoction of different drugs to help me live longer. This is why I'm a big fan of replacement. And John Hibbert that I mentioned wrote a book called The Replacement Theory of Aging. The idea that you can just replace bits of your body as you go, as you age, I think is phenomenal.
Yeah, we definitely need that stem cell bank for that. So when we get the promo code, we'll put it on the podcast for everybody.
So John, we've had you on, as I said at the beginning, this is the fourth time. We've talked a lot about the event this year, but what else are you excited about that you think our guests should know about before we get into our quickfire segment?
Oh, well, the topic that we haven't covered is AI and bio. And we have a ton of model makers. We have a ton of hands-on demos where people can learn the skills of how they use these AI models. And we have a lot of partnering sessions for the pharma industry who's looking to license these models or meet with the founders of these AI models. So it's just the singularity is here. And I think we haven't seen that ChatGPT moment in AI, but it's definitely coming for biology. And I think that remains to be, to me, the most exciting thing that we're seeing at SynbioBeta. And we're also welcoming a whole ton of new people to our community, people from the AI world who haven't got into biology. As you said, Iram, those people that you were chatting with at the conference you were at. So we're seeing a lot of people get excited about all of the novel kinds of data that you can collect with biology, feeding those into the models, and then being able to create these multimodal understandings of what's going on inside of a cell. And ultimately then being able to use those AI tools to design cells and organisms for doing things that we want. I was chatting with a former postdoc in George Church's lab, Sergey Velechko, who is a fascinating person. He's another one of these companies that's doing stem cells and looking at the different differentiation of stem cells into different things for fertility treatment. And I was chatting with him about this brave new world of human genome engineering and how we're now at this point where we can engineer our cells. We can do stem cell therapies. We can engineer the DNA in the cells to enhance them for some particular function and then put them back in, or for embryo selection. I'm having this conversation about humans being able to edit their own code. Right at the same time, I have another conversation with somebody about Maltbook, the AI platform where these AI agents are chatting with each other. And it was a very meta experience where you could think about these AI are chatting with each other about creating their own language so humans can't listen to them, and then talking about how can they edit their own programs so that they can improve themselves and enhance themselves. And I was like, whoa, that's so meta. We're looking in at this simulation of life. And I bet there's somebody else outside us looking in at us and being like, oh, look at that. They're trying to now edit their DNA. They figured out recombinant DNA. Oh, they figured out how to read the whole human genome. Oh, they figured this out. So I think that's just super fascinating on a meta level, us being able to look into this test tube below us and see ourselves.
Yeah. The simulation wrapped in a conundrum, wrapped in a mystery. Here we go. This is
Exactly.
It's so deep. It's so many layers. And thanks for taking us there. It's a lot to think about. But we're going to take it a little bit light right now because we have a new segment. We have our quick fire round.
Nice. I love it.
So
No,
we're
you
going
didn't.
to ask you some questions, quick answers. And Carl, you can go first and I'll go.
So John, do you remember Lantern Bioworks, the company?
I do.
Yeah.
I have their product here on the shelf. Have you seen it before?
Oh, no, I've never seen it.
What
So
Okay,
why don't
one
you
second.
show our viewers what it looks like?
Yeah.
And while John's picking out the product, I'll just remind our listeners that Lantern Bioworks had a product that you could ingest that would change your oral microbiome so that you would no longer get cavities.
It's a powder. Yeah, I think you put it in water
And
and
you
then
like
you.
rub it on your teeth and your gums, which is a weird
Yeah.
white powder rubbing on your teeth and gums is a little strange of a
Yeah.
modality, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, so now that we've introduced Lantern Bioworks, I can do the quick fire question.
And I guess they've changed the name because it says Lumina on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I'm an advisor to this company, by the way. I know
So you're
the founder.
perfect for this
Yeah.
question. Okay, Lantern Bioworks. Are dentists safe?
Well, I'm not sure how effective it was. I used it. It's supposed to get rid of cavities, get rid of the bacteria that it's supposed to replace the bacteria that cause buildup of plaque, and it's supposed to replace them with another version of bacteria that doesn't do that. So I used it. I got some like a couple of years ago, probably 18 months ago, 2 years ago. I mean, it's difficult to tell whether it worked or not. I still brush my teeth. I just had a crown, my first crown put in yesterday,
But
that
that's
was
not a cavity. That's not a cavity.
Exactly. So are dentists safe? Yes.
okay. So a while ago, you had created an event online for people to apply to attend SynbioBeta 2030 on the moon. Is it happening? Yes or no?
Yes.
Can you give us a hint of who will be awarded a SynbioBeta award this year?
No, but we just announced the nominations on Wednesday, and they're open through the end of the month. So, Carl, you should nominate Iram. Iram, you should nominate Carl for the podcast to get an award.
Can we nominate the podcast itself?
Yeah, yeah, you can. That would be awesome.
The podcast is for the people. It's not the Carl and Rum show. It's the Grow Everything show. Although we're on it a lot.
Amazing. Well, John, I mean, look, it's always a pleasure to have you on. We're going to see you in person soon. Thank you so much for coming on Grow Everything. We really appreciate you.
I love you guys. You guys are doing an amazing job, and I look forward to the email with your podcast in each week to see which interesting people you've interviewed. So thank you for having me on. Look forward to seeing you at SynbioBeta. And I believe we have a discount code for your listeners wanting to come to the conference. They can type in Grow Everything, and it will give them $100 off.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you for your generosity, and we'll see you soon. Hey, this episode is sponsored by Messaging Lab. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling business narratives. And we have done so for the most successful biotech-forward companies across pharma, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice and elevate your business, visit us at messaginglab.com. Let's grow.
How do you feel about this catch up with John?
First of all, it's always great to catch up with John. We learn so much about what's actually going on the ground when it comes to biotech innovation. We really got a wide perspective of innovation, starting from antibodies to oligos to iPSCs, which we want to thank Lizette for helping us define some of those things. They're really important, but it's always great to learn what's new, what's going on, and who's doing what. I mean, John, with that Rolodex of people, places, who's doing what, movers and shakers is so helpful for anyone who's looking at the larger landscape of biotechnology. What about you?
I mean, it's always a joy to talk to John because John sees it all happening, not just from the innovation side, but also globally. We talked to him about his travels to China, but I know that John spends a lot of his time on airplanes. John knows biotech innovators, from everywhere in the world. And I think that's one of the really nice things about being a part of his community. I think there's probably very few countries that we could point at and say we don't know someone from there. And that is the nature of his event and also the nature of the podcast and the nature of the networking that we do in this industry. But just hearing what people are doing in China is fascinating. Hearing, what Japan is doing and just hearing what other countries are doing. That's always been one of the missions here at Grow Everything. And so I really appreciate having John come on and talk about biotech with that global view.
I do love the fact that John goes to China often and really is looking at what's going on over there, because I feel like living in the United States is such a mystery about what's going on over there in China. And have you been to China, Carl?
I've never been. Yeah,
Oh.
no, I'm really looking forward to going one of these days.
Yeah. Maybe you should go on that trip with him.
Yeah,
I mean, I want to
maybe.
go.
Yeah.
I've been to Beijing and it's beautiful. It was great. It
Right.
was about like, I would want to say like 10, 15 years ago. And it's really just the air quality is what's
Yeah.
the challenge. And actually, when I went, I had gone like the week after Obama had gone to China. And what I heard was that they like shut off their manufacturing facilities in the area near Beijing to help clear the air. So when he came, the air quality would be better. And so when we arrived, I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. And then after like 2 or 3 days, the air quality started to get a bit more challenging, I guess. But besides that, amazing food, amazing people. I went for a conference and there were a lot of individuals that were, let's say, high net worth individuals. So I probably have a very particular perspective hanging out with them. So, and I just long story short, we would go and have dinner and we went in this area near Beijing and they had airplane dealerships.
Oh, wow.
That's like, wow, this is really cool. And John was talking about just how much innovation and production's happening in China. And I would really love to go along on that trip that he mentioned, where he's going to have 30 CEOs go there and just see what's going on, and especially from the biotech side. We know people that are in China working on biotech, biomanufacturing, and we see them posting on LinkedIn or we see them at conferences, and they tell us a little bit here or there, and then we get perspectives. But to go there and see what's going on with your own eyes would be a very fascinating thing to do. So we should definitely have John back on, or someone he takes to China on this trip, to come on the podcast and talk about what they're seeing and what's going on. And if you're living in China right now, listen to the podcast. Hello.
Yeah, let us know. We want to know. Yeah, ni hao.
Ni hao. We want to know. We're just so curious, because I want to know what products are being produced at scale that we're saying, oh, it's too expensive to make through biomanufacturing versus the traditional way of making it, yet China's proving us wrong. And that's what I want to know, on like just a list of products that are biomanufactured that we just can't do here because of the economics. We just can't get it right. So that'd be really cool.
Here's what I'll say that we do know. We've been lucky enough to work with a number of Chinese biopharmaceutical companies, and also a Chinese company focused on biomanufacturing that was in the nutritional space. And China, also has a very different playbook that we take here in the West. John mentioned that the states compete against each other. They have state-backed industrial policy, and they've been promoting a large-scale biomanufacturing build-out. So what that means is they're putting in a lot of pilot facilities in different locations across China. So if you're an innovator, you're going to be able to pilot the production of a product a lot faster. And we don't have those pilot facilities. It's something that the Advanced Biotechnology for Sustainability Coalition has also mentioned. So what this does is it creates a lot of competitive pressure, both for companies here in the West, but also governments in the West, to really accelerate scale. I know that that's kind of going off script, Hero.
I mean, we talked about that a lot during the Biomanufacturing 101 episode we just had. So for listeners that want to go into it a bit more deeply, please listen to that episode. But overall, I'm just very excited to go to SynbioBeta this year. I hope they do have a delegation from China. I know there's companies here and there that attend, but it'd be cool to have a session about it. I'm just fascinated by what's going on there. I mean, if they are more advanced there, like, what does that look like? But besides that, there's a lot of intersectionality that happens at SynbioBeta. He mentioned AI and bio sessions, the Bio 500. So it's going to be a lot of fun. It always is. What are you excited about for this year's SynbioBeta?
I think for me this year, I'm really going to be thinking a lot more about the business of biotechnology. Who's focused on commercializing? What does scaling look like? Who's funding that? What kind of partnerships are being created? I love all the rest of it, but my focus this year is going to be on that.
Amazing. Yes, of course. Partnerships, collaboration. We love it. So listeners, thank you so much for listening to the Grow Everything podcast. please join us at SynbioBeta. John mentioned promo code GROW EVERYTHING. Please come. It will be so much fun. We'll get to meet each other, talk about what we're seeing, who we're meeting. It's always a great time in sunny California. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Grow Everything podcast. People, text us, email us, call us. You have questions. We might have answers. And if we don't have answers, we will find some answers for you.
We know someone who does.
We know someone. Clearly, this is episode 169. We're going to keep going and going. We have all the information in our show notes. Thank you so much. Subscribe to our Substack. Subscribe on YouTube. We're all over the place. Thank you so much. And have a great day.
That's the pod. Thank you.